Hey everybody, we have a very special guest today in our art class. Please welcome McKinley Wallace III, right here in Baltimore, artist, muralist, teacher, just graduated with his Master's of Art in Teaching. Thank you, McKinley, for being here.
Thank you for thinking of me so I can talk about my work, and let's get started. This is a close-up of a 5 foot by 5 foot square painting. It is called Hall of Fame, Homes of Augusta T. Chisel and Margaret Briggs Gregory Hawkins. They were two strong, empowering women during the early to mid 20th century that fought for women's rights, especially Black women's rights, when women's rights usually meant just white women's rights, and fighting for the vote, for women to vote. So here is one of those women, Augusta T. Chisel, that is in front of three buildings. The one on the far right is where she lived. It still exists on Druid Hill Ave. And right next to it, the one in the middle is Margaret Briggs Gregory Hawkins' home. So this is where they did a lot of organizing. They spent a lot of time bringing in the community, locals to talk about the power of a vote and why it matters and how to sign up or to register. So there isn't much information about these two women who were also both educators in the city in their time. So I felt like it was my duty, my responsibility to celebrate them, especially during 2020, which is the centennial year of the 19th Amendment. So I was able to be a part I was able to participate in an exhibition with a group of other artists talking about the 19th Amendment, what it means for women and definitely for people of color. And it's a challenging topic of who is remembered and fighting for the 19th Amendment and who isn't. So that reflects on me making sure that these women are seen and where they lived and where they did a lot of work is seen. So some of the work you may have seen me do is usually very bare bones, where you have individuals that are in kind of very empty spaces. To me, I think about it's really important the things that I put into a piece and the things that I put out of a piece. But the one that you were just seeing is one that has a strong environment that Augusta T. Chisel is placed in. And the reason for that is because it's very important for me to make sure that I represent where she's coming from in the most meaningful way. If it's not about the environment, it's more about the people, then that's where I don't think I need to include where they're at. But in this case, I do. And the reason for that is because they did a lot of organizing here, and also looking at the condition of the environment, that the Baltimore city. And when we think about, definitely when we talk to people who aren't in Baltimore, haven't been in Baltimore, they might say, of course, like crime and boarded up homes. And that is true. It has a limited sort of mindset on what that means, but it can be a sad way of describing like all the Black excellence and industry that have come through this city years back, and to remember those stories as much as we can, but to also say like it's a sad thing that you have these two pivotal women not really remembered too much in history, like on the random websites about them, not really any photos about them, not even much signage or information about them either. You see this small, like in the fencing in front of the home, you see this small little plaque, and that's pretty much describing them. And it's only like 3 sentences, and that's it. When they were so much more. So making this large piece talked about them. And I also wanted to say that this is where they lived, and it's right next to an abandoned building to the right, to the far left side. When you see photos, limited photos of their work, it's just cropped off where you just see their two homes, and it's like in a really well lit, beautiful sort of setting, showing the nice side. But for this, I
Right.
wanted to tell the full story because it's the honest truth. And you come into it saying, this is my city, this is what it looks like. I have pride in that, but also just saying that in comparison to some other leaders where the homes are renovated, they're museums, there's tons of funding in getting into it. You're seeing these homes that you could easily walk by. I'm sure maybe a lot of you who are in West Baltimore, which these two homes are, might have walked past it many times and not have known who lived there. So this is why this piece exists. Of course, this setting was based on a photograph that I took. I drove by it, took a few photos, and then made a drawing of it. So this is what it looks like now. But back then, that tree wasn't there. Of course, that abandoned building was somewhere, a home or a business of some kind. And then Augusta T. Chisel, the woman that you see here with a baby in her arms, died a long time ago. So I'm incorporating, or I'm putting together what it looks like now with a image of her together to kind of play around with time, the past and the present. Like her spirit is still walking through the city because she did a lot for the city. And to show the baby in her arms talking about just generations. I just try to do some research, but if I can't really know much research about, I didn't find much stuff about Augusta, there's no way I was really gonna find much information about that baby. But it would be really cool if that baby's still in Baltimore. And of course, they're probably like a grandparent now. So Black excellence is something I really like to include in my work. Sometimes the people are really important, and sometimes it's about what they're doing with their bodies, what they're representing with their bodies. And a lot of times when I don't have a space around the people and they're more in these kind of empty spaces. Well, people might identify them as empty, but for me, there's definitely meaning for it. It's a specific reason why I choose black and white. Black represents black power, black spaces, all black you can think of in a positive spin on it. Black joy, black pride, black comfort, when they're surrounded in that space. And it's not about the objects, it's about just the feeling of being in a black space. And that's why I put them with a black background to fill up the whole surface. But you have some images where people are in white spaces, and that is about them trying to navigate out of it. As an African American person, we are in a world that is, for lack of a better way of thinking about it, has been set up there's a system that's been set up to oppress us. So you have these people you have Black people that are walking inside of it. And sometimes you might see a white person or like white presence as a person pointing at them. If we think about white supremacy. So you either have them out of the space where you see that power, or you see them trying to survive and navigate through it, but still showing that excellence, that power, that resistance that we see in the Black Lives Matter movement. That's the reason why I chose to use this as a career, to be an educator, to be an artist, because I feel like my strength is to tell stories through visuals. I like to talk about history, but I feel like if I'm not there, you can see the history through the work, and it will last much longer than me, hopefully, fingers crossed. And it talks about the past in a better way than I could try to articulate. We have an image here of a person in a hoodie, and if we think about hoodies and how that is seen on Black people, there's definitely a very strong judgment that people can have on that person's identity, where they're coming from, their intention, why they're in a particular place, should they be in that place. So here, you can't see the face, you can't tell the race, you can't tell the gender. But if we look at the image, I would say most of us are already starting to make a guess of who the person is on the other side of, or inside of that jacket. And I want the viewer, you, whoever looks at this image, to question why. Why are you thinking that? Because really, I'm not giving you any sort of clues. Not even if the hands aren't even visible. And I'm not even really giving you the place. This is where the place doesn't matter. I mean, it matters because I'm asking you to try to fill in that space. What do you think this person is? What do you think their identities are? But I'm giving you bare bones information for you to fill in. But the process of making all these has been exciting, because I like to incorporate drawings. Sometimes I copy my drawings, make copies of them so I can cut them out in collage. Sometimes I combine images from the past and put them into my work, and I put them on top of or inside of like paintings that I've made, that are usually, like we see here, pretty simple. And we can see that if you zoom in like before, we see images that we might have seen before, or at least poses that remind us of something. This Black woman that is holding her fist up to show power, that's stepping out. She's more in the Black space, outside of that white space. And then you're having this individual, president of the past, who is holding up a Bible. And if you haven't heard of that, well, I'll say Trump holding up a Bible. There is so much weight in that, of him using that as a way to talk about like his power and his position of power, and the white space that this Black woman has found some way to get out of and to find pride in who she is. Is the process of making a Black space, thinking how big I want that space to be, how big or small I want the white space to be, and thinking about proportions of these two bodies, thinking about the size of her arm in comparison to his arm, the size of his body and her body, the scale. How big do I want her to be in comparison to him? It's always important to think about that. Any of you, this is kind of a random thing, which I always was told, it's not an example here, but like proportions, if you exaggerate them, can say a lot too. I have gotten better at proportions and scale enough where I can draw something and pretty much get it pretty accurate. But I will always tell you that if you're working with proportion or scale for the first time, always work larger. Whatever it is, if you can. I know we're in virtual and it's hard right now and you might not have those materials, but whenever you can, and I'm speaking as a muralist, work large. And if it's a proportion and you're doing a hand, a rule of thumb, hands usually look weird if they're small. Like if we make fun of people, I don't know, this is kind of not even political, but like Trump is known for having small hands, and people make fun of that all the time because they're like, that's weird. But usually if hands are bigger than you think, they usually bring power and strength with them, and less obvious that they're big. It's just like, wow, those are really strong, well-drawn hands. It's because I'm thinking bigger than smaller.
Can you talk about this piece? I really love this piece. Let me see if I can share it.
Oh yeah, so this is also one of my favorite pieces, which has more than just people, but I'm thinking about posters, which I believe y'all have talked about as far as being an activist. What do you want to communicate with your art? And also I've brought other elements besides people, so that I want to share that. In this piece, this is maybe some of you have heard of this person, maybe not. but this is Kwame Ture, earlier named Stokely Carmichael. He was not only a civil rights activist with Martin Luther King, and also part of a college group advocating for civil rights. He later became a Black Power leader with the Black Panther movement and was a huge inspiration of protection under the law. So radical and peaceful, protecting yourselves by any means necessary, but also resisting peacefully. So he was a person that went between these two opposites on trying to figure out how Black people should exist in America. But he's really not talked about in history because he's seen as a person that was strongly advocating for Black justice in any way that's necessary and what that looks like. So not like Martin Luther King, who we would stand right next to. But it's really important to learn his story and where he comes from, and the reason why he left America to go to Africa to be more with his people and to learn his roots. But anyway, here's an image of him younger in his college days, and seen as that radical sort of love to hate sort of African American person in history, not really talked about. And then you're seeing these firefighters that are in front of him, and they're representing the Birmingham campaign of 1963. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen that. You might not have known it was the Birmingham campaign, but if you've seen any images, black and white videos of firefighters hosing down a lot of Black people in the street, that was most likely from that event. And we see here, they're not really spraying down Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael. They're really just standing there in position, ready to go, not sure what to do. And there's a reason for that. Like all the other pieces, there are these just moments in time where there isn't violence, there isn't trauma, but there's moment for the viewer to kind of figure out what's going to happen and what are these people thinking about? Where could this go? So you've seen them standing there, they're not hosing him down, they're just staring. And I wanted them to be staring at something that's bigger, larger than life. If we learn about his history, he was a very influential person in Black history and Black culture. So I wanted his memory to be bigger, like almost towering over them. And for them to be just kind of like, he's too big, he's too large, he's too strong for us to wash away his impact. And then to think about that, his impact, and then in this white space that of course is massive, that is kind of maybe taking away his image, but I wanted to make him large to still show that he's visible. But I didn't want to put any more things around it, like the buildings and places and things. It's not about that. So for me, just taking out all that and just to have that interaction between the firefighters, that poster, and to think about the Black space and the white space. And if you look above, you'll see that there is a surveillance plane. And during the summer, through October of last year, you might have seen planes flying around, and they were surveillance planes in Baltimore City that was funded by the police to just observe the city. And usually predominantly Black cities are areas where there's a high population of people of color, and to just keep an eye out for crime, where it was definitely not invading people's privacy, constant observations, recording. So that's something from 2020. And then you have an image from 63, and then you have an image mid 60s as well, but putting them together to kind of almost make it look timeless, really have you imagine this happening now, and putting images together to talk about just experiences from past and now. but all framed in America, which has Black spaces and white spaces.
That's so impressive, McKinley, the way you talk about history and its relevance now and its connection to cultural heritage. So you've spoken a lot about Black excellence and your career as an artist, but I have one final question for you. When did
Sure.
you decide? I mean, you're clearly very talented and you could have gone many different directions in your life, but why did you choose art as your career?
I chose art as my career. Well, what got me into art in the first place was when I was really little, being an only child, I had a lot of time to myself. So at home, you have pencil and paper, which I'm sure if you're at home right now, maybe that might be the only material that you have, and that's okay. And I spent a lot of time just making and just exploring and exercising my imagination. So I loved movies, and then when you love movies and you love stories and movies, and you're like, well, what if this happened or what if that happened, and you can draw it out and create that world for yourself, and it's a way for you to just escape for a moment. So I love doing that. A teacher at a school just noticed me and said, "This is really good. You might want to apply to this school that really celebrates art." And then I went there, and then went to a high school that also did the same thing, being fortunate to do that. Went to college for art. And also, which is funny, is before I went to art school, I thought I wanted to be a dentist. That's what I thought. I applied for it and I got in to FAMU, if any of you are into HBCUs. I did a lot of random jobs. I worked with a teacher at a point. Then I did some programs, and I realized that I love just talking about art. And when I was trying to figure out my career, there was definitely a point where I wasn't making as much art as I wanted to. But every time I realized that, regardless of what I was doing for work, and I came to the studio, I just felt so comfortable and like at home. Even though I'm from South Florida, I felt like at home to just work, 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 and then to reflect on my day. And I think a lot in my head, and to have something to do on a piece of paper in a studio when you're kind of by yourself in your own, just with yourself. Um, why not do that all the time? You know, why not talk about art as an educator? Why not talk about art, teach people how to talk about and make art, and then make art yourself, and then share that you're making art and that you're exploring some interesting ideas, and then watch, rinse, and repeat, but in the most beautiful way, over and over and over again. So yeah, I love it. It's a long journey. But yeah, for you, if it is a long journey, enjoy it, you know?
McKinley, we're so lucky to have you not only visit us here at KIP, but just right here in Baltimore. You have so much love and passion for your heritage, your cultural heritage, your race, your history. And I really want to say thank you and congratulations on all of the phenomenal artwork and lessons that you've taught us today.
Yeah, I hope this was meaningful, and everyone, yeah, I'd love to hear what you have to say. So any question at all, um, send it my way and I'd love to answer it. Bye, everyone.